Warning, this podcast contains honest conversations from fellow human beings in their factory default settings. If saucy language causes you to clutch your pearls in horror, this may not be the episode for you. But remember, Jesus met people where they are, and so do we.
Hey everybody, welcome back. My name's Ken.
And my name's Richard.
And this is Don't Blame Jesus. Today, we're doing something totally different.
We're totally different. Do you want me to set it up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so Westboro Baptist showed up here in Spokane. And exactly. And so they were picketing or protesting. Mm-hmm. There was a Christian conference that was downtown. Okay, yeah. And that would have been bad enough that just they'd show up and did that. But no, of course not. No, they went to Gonzaga. And they protested there, and then they went to Spokane Falls Community College, and they protested there, and they were going to go and protest out at East Valley High School. Don't know why, but they were going to go and do that, and then East Valley, they got smart when they heard that they were coming, and like, okay, everybody gets to go home early. And so, anyway, so when I heard that they were there, and my daughter is at the community college, right, and so, anyway, I wanted to get more background on those people, right? Because they aren't Baptists, okay?
Right.
So normally I would go with any kind of cults. I go to Cultish. I love Cultish. Cultish is a really cool podcast. I highly recommend it. You can learn a lot of stuff there.
Right.
And there's some really great stories of people who come out of cults, and they've been hurt, and there's this horrible whatever, but they don't throw the baby away with the bathwater.
Right.
And so where there's goofed up theology, the hosts are able to bring them and guide them, into the right thing. And these people, they also have stories of people who've come out, and now here's how they're able to walk forward with their Christian walk. And just because something's goofed up, whether they're telling you about God, doesn't mean that everything about God is all goofed up. All right. So they didn't have one. They didn't have a episode on Westboro Baptist. I hope that they do in the future. So I was trying to find a podcast, and I stumbled upon Trust Me. And so I listened to 2 episodes that they had where they interviewed Laura and Drain. And then the next episode, they were doing this one on gurus. And going, okay, great, whatever. I was just listening to it. But what hit me is in their introduction, what they do is they set it up and they go, well, what's the cultiest thing that happened to you this week? All right. And so one of them is shared, and then the other one is sharing. So that is what we have. We have the audio. We're going to go through, because it hit me. It hit me hard. It hit me as they're asking great questions. This is time where they're just being honest. I love it. I love it when people the mask comes down, okay, and it is a time of of vulnerability, of honesty. These are questions. These are important questions,
right? And
people are asking these, or at least thinking them, whether they actually ask them out loud or not.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this podcast will ever get back to them.
Well, we'll tag them.
If it does, cool. And thank you. I just want to thank you in advance for your honesty.
Yeah.
And hopefully we address it. We want to address it with all love and kindness as we possibly can. And I think that what we're going to say is going to be able to minister to others.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let's go ahead.
Awesome.
Rock and roll.
All right. So let me go to Audacity here.
Okay.
And this is the first clip. Let's go ahead and start this here.
What about you? What's the cultiest thing that happened to you?
So for people who don't know that much about OCD or whatever, you can have different themes. It doesn't really matter. It can latch on to different themes and it obsesses over that thing and it can completely change. One of my themes is existential OCD, but I just couldn't stop thinking about time and the linear nature of time and how we're all going to die, and I don't believe in an afterlife. And it was just listen, I will probably continue to think about it for the rest of my life, obviously, because I am not a religious person. It can be hard to tell the difference between like how much of this is like the normal amount of thinking about something versus ruminating. And I was like, okay, I'm going to just try to actually explore this topic and like do a little dive and like see if there's anything out there that I can connect with that I'll feel some way about.
Okay.
Wow.
Right. So how did that hit you? What are you thinking?
Well, I mean, it sounds really similar to kind of like my thoughts as a kid, like just trying to come to grips with stuff. But I don't know.
Yeah. Well, my first thought was, for me, I mean, I've been a believer for a long time. And so for me, the fear of death is like, I mean, do I actually want to go through the pain of death? I'm not necessarily. Right. But, I'm an older man. I have all sorts of pain anyway, right? So there's a certain part where,
At some point, the pain of death is less than what's going on every day.
Right,
so
exactly,
like, okay,
exactly,
fine,
right. And I had kidney stones before, so I don't know if death hurts worse than kidney stones. I have no idea. But with that being said, like dying for the believer in Christ is like, that's not that big and scary thing. I mean, I'm not necessarily like that pain, and who knows if that's like a day's worth of pain or months worth of pain or no pain because it's instantaneous. Who knows, right? Yeah. Only God knows what we face with that. But absent from the body, present with the Lord, I'm good.
Yeah.
And there's no worry there. But I remember for you, that wasn't your story, at least not. I mean, you said recently, I said, when's the last time, after I listened to this, I said, when's the last time that you worried about death?
Well, I mean, and I think part of what she's going to talk about later it is a little bit more relevant to my story, but I mean, I'll just tell you really fast. When I was a kid, I remember being at my grandma's house. I think I told the story maybe on the podcast.
Yeah.
I figured out I was going to die from watching the prophecies of Nostradamus, and nobody had any answers for me. No one in my family was a Christian at that point. I was like, okay, so what the heck do we do? And then I was plagued for decades by a dream of death over and over and over and over again until, golly, I would say my early 40s when I finally had the resolution. Same dream all the way through except for the very end. Instead of encountering the brick wall of death, I went right through it and was in Jesus' presence. And then I haven't had the dream since. It like really rested my fears at that point. So yeah, that's for me. I really feel for her because I'm like, when I realized that I was going to die as a child, I called out to the universe for an answer, and Jesus answered me. Basically, that's the way I feel about it, because it's not like I knew, and I know that like my great-grandfather was a believer always, and he was praying for us and praying for me and everything, and so I'm sure that his prayers helped get me to the right door to find the right Messiah, but yeah, I feel bad to have that kind of a fear and never have that addressed. That's frightening. It's depressing.
Yes.
It's depressing. Maybe we should continue on a little bit and see
Let's do it.
So I started reading. So I asked Jack for some books on existentialism for Christmas, which he got me.
That is so funny. It's the most wonderful time. You're gonna die.
It's basically my brain, yes. I'm like, another Christmas? I'm 35. I'm definitely dying like tomorrow.
So there's some funny stuff in that. Well, and the thing too is, just the irony for me a little bit. Like, Christmas should be a time of joy, right?
Yeah.
And like, if you actually think about, what Christmas means as believers, right? Because like, okay, great, the Messiah that's been promised is coming into the world, and there's this light that's shining in darkness. So this is all wonderful stuff that's happening, but with that being said, okay, Christmas can be a big time of turmoil for
Sure.
a lot of people.
Yeah.
There's expectations, I got to go home, be with the family, and it should be like up here, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
And does it end up there? No, it oftentimes ends up down here, for so many different people, right?
Yeah.
And just the stresses of it. And seasonal affective disorder, right?
Totally.
Like we live far enough north that it gets it's dark at 3:34, something like that. And
Yes.
it's so
happening
we're
soon.
doing it. What this is mid-November, right?
Yeah.
And so it's dark, and it's going to continue, of course, until the 21st. Get darker and darker and darker.
Yeah.
And so and earlier and earlier.
Yep.
So all of that just makes it feel well, and you think, hey, this is one of those, it's a holiday. It's a holy day, right? This should be,
Right.
I should be experiencing something. There should be, everybody's wishing me Merry Christmas, and there should be a time of, happiness and joy. And where is it? Where is that wonderful season's greeting and whatever? So I get it. And yeah, if you get a depressing book for Christmas,
Yeah.
Christmas, hey, I'm going to research death for Christmas.
Yeah.
But maybe the thought too about OCD, because we both have kind of OCD thoughts. And for me, I kind of describe it as being like a record. And maybe that's an old-timey reference, right? now.
What?
A record. Once upon a time, they had these discs, right? That they were made out of vinyl. And so, and if you got a scratch in it, you could end up with it going around, and then it hops, and it goes around, and it does the same thing. It's a loop, and it keeps on going. And so sometimes, if I'm not being careful with my mind and taking my thoughts captive, and let them run amok, and where it can get into like, okay, here's my negative thought, and it'll repeat over, and it'll look at it like it's, I don't want to say it's meditating, but it's meditating. It's a negative meditation.
Right.
Rather than having it be thinking about something good, I can think about something that's like angry and frustrating and angsty, and then go around and then like, oh yeah, well there was this part too. And like then it like goes round, and then like, oh man, and each time it just seems like digs in and goes deeper. And when I realize that's happening, I got to do something else completely different.
Yeah.
I got to stop it, because I have enough of like low grade depression. I can get myself sucked into a really horrible hole. And so I was sharing with a friend of mine today, hey, when you're going through this, for me it's going back to Altar Boys albums.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, When You're a Rebel, GLM, Got Little Music, Against the Grain. Those are kind of timeless ones for me, but they're encouraging, right? And so, and it takes me back to my Bible school days, and just the good times and the fellowship. And
it was simpler.
It was simpler, and just like, it's just, me and Jesus, and I love God, and that kind of thing. And it's just, yeah, it's good. And so sometimes I just have to go and get my brain somewhere else. Yeah. Maybe it can be a good Christian podcast, or for some people to get off on modern praise music. Cool. I like there's some good Christian metal that has some good Christian themes.
As long as it's Christian, we're all good.
Exactly. And that'll encourage me and get me out of whatever the funk is that I'm stuck in.
Yeah.
How about you? What are you thinking when you get into like OCD kind of? You were saying a little. I'll just let you go.
Yeah. Well, I think for me the OCD stuff is mostly like repetitive stuff. Like I was telling you before, like walking on a sidewalk, my steps have to kind of line up with the pattern of the tiles. If there's like 2 steps of tile or 3, or there's breaks or whatever, I just kind of work it out that's the way it works when I'm walking, even if I have to change my gait a little smaller or bigger. Yeah. Or like, maybe if I'm fooling around with like the vents in the car, like I will do it 8 times and then I'll stop. Mm-hmm. But if I do it once, I can't do it once, I have to do it 8 and then I have to stop.
All right. It's
just the way it goes. But I don't get in that kind of mental repeating kind of thing. I just don't, it doesn't seem to stick with me. Like I'm easily, squirrel. I'm easily distracted, so I get out pretty fast.
Okay.
So I think that for me, that's the way it works out. Shall we go on to the next
let's
clip?
do it. Let's do it.
Okay, let's see what they go next.
So I'm currently reading The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus, which I was resistant to reading because my ex loved this book. But I'll tell you, reading it is so helpful. Even though I'm not even to the meat of the philosophy yet, because he's going through different philosophers, in the history of existentialism or whatever, and their different approaches and their different ways of dealing with the harsh reality of death or whatever. And just that alone has unlocked something for me where I'm like, oh, I'm not alone floating in the universe dealing with this angst. There's a long history and a long tradition of people being like, oh my God, I'm going to die. What do I do? I'm going to die. What do I do? Yeah. And something about just connecting to these dead white men or whatever who had ideas on how to deal with the reality of death has been really helpful. And I'm bringing this back to cultiness because I feel like so much of what I experience, why it's difficult, is that I feel alone in it, is that I don't feel like I have a community in it. And even old dudes on a page can make a difference because I'm not the only one having these thoughts. I'm not the only one who doesn't believe in God. I'm not, who's trying to figure out a way to have meaning in my life without some kind of religious belief system. So
that doesn't make any sense to me at all, dude, because I completely identify with the first thing she said about, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. What do I do? What do I do? That is exactly where I went. Mm-hmm. But if I didn't have the answer in Jesus, and it didn't happen immediately. I mean, it took some time. I would not find camaraderie with dead white guys, whatever that's a problem. That does not give me peace.
No.
Knowing that other people are suffering the same way I'm suffering, that does not help me. I want an answer. So I feel bad that it's just no comfort to me at all.
No, it's I don't. Yeah, I feel uncomfortable for her.
Yeah.
In that.
Well, I find it okay, I don't have the answer, but other people don't have the answer either.
So high five, right?
Yeah, so high five. No. It's how could okay, I feel like a lot of times when people come out of cults or they come out of stuff, they come out and they find nothing.
Yes.
They just throw everything away. And I do not understand that philosophy because I've wanted the truth since I was a kid. Since I've learned I was going to die, I needed answers. I really wanted a manual of the universe. What is going on?
Yeah.
What in the world is this for, and why are we here? And you go through all the things everyone goes through. Is I didn't ask to be born, and I didn't want to be born just to die, and it's all meaningless and all that kind of stuff. You go around in circles and you do all that stuff. Without finding an answer, I would be miserable. I couldn't bear it.
Yeah.
And it hurts my heart that whatever they were in, the cult stuff or whatever, that they, she's plainly saying she's non-religious. Well, okay, religion on the whole is not good.
Right.
But Jesus is the answer. And it's so sad to me that the truth of Jesus has been so misrepresented, corrupted, added to, weakened, sometimes diluted, that the truth is so dang hard to find.
Absolutely.
That's sad.
Yeah.
But there is an answer.
There is. Well, and that's what I was thinking about as I was going through and hearing this. And both of these hosts have come out of some sort of cult background.
Right.
Okay. Which reminded me of John chapter 4, the woman at the well. And in a sense, okay, as compared to Orthodox Judaism, the Samaritans, then she was a Samaritan woman.
Right.
It was they were in a cult,
Yeah.
because it was not the same teaching, and it was sideways. And how do we practice this here, and here? And it was interesting how Jesus. I mean, he is drawn to he has to go through that village, that's what the text says, which is interesting. That this was
the plan.
This was the plan. He had to go through there, and then he's willing to whatever it takes to be able to to communicate with her. She's there. She's an outcast, and he talks with her, engages her. She's trying to put up walls. He's trying to, talk to her around those walls, and she's the first one that he lets know that he is the Messiah.
That's awesome.
Which is
so cool,
yes,
dude.
yes, like totally goes, outside the the rank and file of all the religious leaders, and
Not a Jew.
not a Jew,
to a Samaritan.
to a
And
Samaritan,
not a man to a woman. And not a woman of good repute,
Yeah,
but a woman of terrible repute.
Exactly.
It's like, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Just because God loves, that's what he
Yeah.
does. He loves those that aren't easy to love, or that's what he does.
He loves, I think it was,
Go ahead.
I think it was Piper. I don't adhere to everything Piper says, but one thing that he said, I think, is Jesus loves you more than you love anything else.
Yes.
He loves you more than you love your favorite thing. He loves you more than anything.
Yeah.
That really hit me today. Like,
Yeah.
man, he does care.
Right.
He really does love.
Right. And and then he's
For them.
For them. Yes.
Yeah.
And then he sends her back into the village, and and she's like, this is amazing. This guy's told me everything that I've done. And all these people come out, and they get ministered to, and then they turn and say to her, well, first we were believing because of you, and now we've seen it ourselves. And this,
Right.
And it's like the light goes on for all of them. Like, this is it. This is truth. This is real. And so, just because you've experienced a counterfeit doesn't mean the real's not there. The genuine's there.
Totally.
The counterfeit proves that there's a genuine. So go ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway,
Well, you seem perfectly primed to join a cult about existentialism.
totally, 100%.
I will just say too, like, I was talking to somebody the other day, and she was like, yeah, it's so weird. I was raised religious. And my boyfriend was talking to me, and he was like, yeah, I've never even really thought about dying. And she was like, what are you talking about? I had to do the now I lay me down to sleep. If I die, these blah, blah, blah every night when I went to bed. And there is just this like weird discrepancy between people who are raised religious. And obviously that's not across the board, but I do feel like it's easier to obsess on if you're super focused on it when you're little. And to be clear, I think our society deals with death horribly, and the people who never think about it
Yes.
are so blindsided, and they're
Totally.
like, my grandma died. And I'm like, right. What did you think she was gonna do?
Yeah. What are your thoughts there?
I think we had talked a little bit before the show about, I grew up in Southern California, and, food comes on a plastic tray at the grocery store, and you don't experience the chicken getting its head cut off like if you're a farm kid. So I didn't have any experience with that stuff. And my parents and grandparents and even great grandparents were mostly healthy. I didn't lose a great grandparent until I was 23. So I spent a lot of time not being around the actualities of death, although I did discover death through that Nostradamus show and figured out 2 + 2 is I'm going to die. So,
Right.
but I can totally see how there is that other. There's the totally focusing on death, and then there's the tra-la-la, I'm not going to think about it type of person. That's a whole nother blind side.
Right.
Totally get that. That's not a good way to go about things.
No, avoidance. Is that the mature way to do anything? Is just like constantly in avoidance?
Well, avoidance is just delaying misery.
Right.
If you know it's going to hurt, rip the Band-Aid off now. Don't wait until it's really, really stuck on later and try and rip it off. Just do it now.
Yes.
And I think the same thing applies that, man, we ought to think about these things. Like there's one of the pastors that I've worked with, Mike Parrott, he's got a book called Begin with the End in Mind.
Yeah.
And I had the privilege of typesetting his book. So, I mean, I got a good inside read of it, really good doing it. But his whole point is, look, everyone is going to face this. So here's the ammunition you need to be able to face it. Here's how you can get yourself ready for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, not just, I mean, it's supremely important with eternity and salvation, but it's also important in everything else. Like, I remember we had a sermon series a while ago at church, and just talking about roads. Every road goes somewhere.
Yes.
And you cannot be on the wrong road and expect to get to the right place. It's not going to happen.
Right.
And so if we don't see our destination clearly and where we want to go, how can we possibly move that direction? So I think it's very valuable for somebody to pay attention to these things and think about them. Isn't there a, like, I don't know if it's a psalm or a proverb that talks about a sad face?
Yeah.
It's
Good
better
for
to
the
go to a
heart.
funeral than to go to a wedding, and it's better because, like, you stop and you think about your end.
Right.
Even in, I can't remember which psalm it is, but it's a psalm about, I think it's a psalm of Asaph where he's talking about the wicked prosper and this and that, and I was jealous. But then I realized that they're all going to die and they're going to go to hell, and that really sucks. And then I wasn't like envying them anymore.
Right.
So I think, boy, the best advice I can give is think about these things.
Absolutely.
And the bestest advice is consider Jesus.
Absolutely. Well, and one I wanted to make mention of too is she's talking about Camus, and and like, I get it. I mean,
I'd never heard of that, so tell everybody what that is.
Yeah. So he's a philosopher.
Okay.
So anyway, with him, I remember at Bible school, one of the guys that I would hang around with and thought was cool. So he smart guy. He'd read Camus and whatever, and we'd chat about all sorts of stuff. At the same time, Kierkegaard and Pascal, where that's where I was going at the same time. And those are pretty heady. Whatever. But now, and I'd highly recommend, way more so than these two, just because of how they're written and the time period and whatever, is C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis not only writes, the Chronicles of Narnia, and then the Ransom trilogy. Ransom trilogy is amazing. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's so good. Screwtape Letters, The Problem of Pain, Mere Christianity. I mean, there's all these different things that are, because he wrestles with all these different issues. He had to, because he's trying to speak truth in the real world that we live in.
Yeah.
And so it needs to be able to address, death and judgment and all of these things. But he doesn't, hardly anybody writes any better than C.S. Lewis. I mean, he's brilliant.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant.
Well, he was definitely a mind that, was an atheist.
Yes.
Met Tolkien.
Yes.
And wrestled his way to Christianity, which is kudos. That's intellectual honesty.
Yes.
To be able to start at the starting line and get to the finish line and have the right answer. I hope that this is what's going to happen with Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
I feel like he's kind of in that same kind of a.
Did you see who he's meeting with recently?
Yeah, with Greg Laurie. I hope that's going to help a ton.
Awesome. I hope that's awesome.
But hopefully Greg Laurie will be able to just give him Jesus, because that's what he needs. But man, props to them for thinking about it, for wrestling through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Well, like I said, it was honesty. That's the reason why we're doing this, because this is a moment of true vulnerability and honesty that the majority of people just avoidance. I'm not going to say it out loud. If I don't say it, it doesn't exist, or
Yeah, I mean, can you just see a little kid with a blanket over their head right now, hiding from mom?
Yeah.
It's the same thing,
Yes.
kind of, and it's not. It's understandable, but it's not wise,
Yeah.
I guess.
But it is
the
Southern
kindest way to say it.
Southern California. I lived in San Diego. This is this is not new territory. This is nature of being man, right?
And partly it's the problem of affluence, because we have everything we need. What need do we have of God?
Yeah.
I think there's definitely a component of that to it.
Yeah.
So,
all right, let's go.
Okay.
No, you're
Benjamin
right.
Button.
You're
Like,
right.
it's not happening. And then I will just also say that our interview yesterday that's coming out next week, the guy said something interesting where he was just like, yeah, maybe this conspiracy theory is real. Maybe it's not, but what the hell can I do about it? Because mine, if nothing happens after you die, that's great to me. I would love just a long nap, but I'm scared of hell. And it's like, something about that spoke to me where it's like, all right, what are you going to do about it? Like, now isn't the time to focus on that. It's the time to focus on living. And that'll do what it will do when you die. But for now, like, you got to figure out your meaning and your shit to do.
Yeah, the fear to me when she said that she wasn't afraid of death in the sense she's hoping that it was just annihilation.
Yes.
That terrifies me, dude.
Right, yeah.
I can't imagine. And that's why, I think honestly, that's why the Nostradamus thing and realizing I was going to die bothered me so much.
Yeah.
How could someone like me stop existing? That's stupid.
Yeah.
How could my thoughts stop? Like, that did not make sense to me.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm far too valuable. I love myself too much for that to happen.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that for her to say that, I just totally do not relate at all about wanting to just be not existing anymore.
Yeah.
I mean,
and like, that's their best hope.
that's their best hope.
That's their best hope because, well, and that's the thing too, is anthropology, the theology of man. Man, he's broken, and there is this. Man wants to worship something, right? He's going to, if he can't find God, he's going to create his own. He's going to create his own thing. Yeah. But there is, like, they know that they're looking into the void, that they're looking into the abyss. Yeah. And and it sucks unless you know Jesus. Right. And so.
How uncomfortable to hear her say she's afraid of hell.
Yes.
I mean,
and then she should be.
Well, absolutely. And I would just say that's a natural, normal prodding of God to help you figure it out. And to say, look, here's the edge of the cliff.
Right.
Come this way.
Well, and people want justice. Mm-hmm. They want those who have done evil in this life. They want them to. You got to pay up. Yeah. If you're going out there and doing horrible things, we don't want the wicked to like skate and just like, okay, well, you did all these horrible things and now you just get it, annihilation and you made out
it's
like
all meaningless.
Yeah, and you made out like a bandit. No, because that's not the way God operates. No. Right? But he's also completely holy. And so, which is completely other than us. And I'm so glad, we have the Old Testament and it's all these types and prophecies leading up to what Jesus did. And if you didn't understand that, all the different things having to do with the Lamb when John the Baptist shows up and we're like, look, it's the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, right? It takes away the sins of the world so that we can be saved, right? So, unless you had all that leading up to it, okay, Jesus all of a sudden just appears on the cross and dies, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah. But, hey, one that is interesting, my men's group just finished up our Cold Case Christianity.
Oh, sweet. How'd that go?
It was so awesome.
That's good.
It was so incredibly awesome, and I highly recommend that. And he has a podcast. So Cold Case Christianity podcast. But, I encourage you to get the book. You don't have to, you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater because, look, we have the story about God providing salvation for us, right? And what he was bringing in is look, we got the early church fathers, right? And this is right up close to, some of these things are in the first century, okay? And when you go through and you look at those, they're mirror images of different parts of Scripture and going, wow. Polycarp, when he was a disciple of Saint John, the apostle, when he's sharing so much Scripture, the story hasn't changed. So when we get told this crap, unfortunately, that the story has changed and it was made up and whenever, and it's like, stop it.
Yeah.
That's not true.
No.
That's not true, because you can go back to the early church fathers and see it's built-in redundancy that's in this entire thing. Those aren't scripture, but they match up with scripture. Right? They share the same story. This story that you're saying got invented later is like, no, it didn't get invented later. It's right here. It's in the first century.
Right. And also, didn't Jesus say regarding the Old Testament scriptures, to the Jews, he said, you look at the scriptures thinking they're going to give you eternal life, but these are they that testify of me.
Yes.
So the whole Old Testament is it's like a prelude to the coming Messiah.
Absolutely.
I want to talk directly to them for a second.
Okay, do it.
Okay. So I would just encourage you very greatly. Having a fear of hell is super, because it may persuade you to seek the Lord. But I would tell you that hell is so bad because heaven is so great.
Yes.
And there will be a moment when, at judgment, I believe you will know what heaven would have been like, and you will be cast into outer darkness and see the glory of God and the love and everything else receding from you. And you will know how good heaven is. So my invitation and my challenge to you is, hell is bad. Don't get me wrong.
Don't go there. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. But rather than focusing on hell and being afraid of hell, take a minute and look into what God is inviting us to. He's inviting us to everlasting life with Him, He's our creator and our sustainer. All life comes from Him. We will be with Him, and we will be in bodies on a new heavens and new earth forever with Him and all of our saved loved ones. And it is going to be so good.
Yes.
So good. We're not going to be sitting on clouds strumming harps bored. We are going to have constant engagement and constant overwhelming joy at what we get to do forever. And hell is terrible. I'm not trying to minimize hell, but I'm trying to maximize heaven. It is so good that God sent His Son to die for us so we could go there and be with Him. He didn't intend for us to go to hell ever. That was not His plan. His plan was for us to be with Him forever. And He only puts us in hell if we reject the free gift He gave. And the gift is free, and I mean free. Some people will accuse you of saying the good news, you're making the gospel, the good news, too good. Well, I challenge you, the gospel is way better news than we think. We are invited to the ultimate party forever. So I understand your fear of hell, and I think that's a great place to start, but then get past that, get over that, and go to the next step. Okay.
Yeah.
End rant. I just wanted to
that was good. No, that was good. That was good. And I think that was definitely needed. Well, and here's the other thing too about hell. Was hell created for people?
No,
it wasn't. No, it's created for the devil and fallen angels. That's what it was originally created for.
Yeah.
As far as being apart from God.
Yeah.
And and if you realize that God is all goodness, and so if you choose to be apart from God, like I reject God. I reject all goodness. What are you left with?
There's nothing else.
Right, and if all you're left with is yourself, who is like it. C.S. Lewis does a great job, and talking about eternity makes us more of what we already are.
Yeah,
and so, if you're already eating yourself with these different things, like going, I reject God for all eternity. Like that's horrible.
Yeah.
And so, but more like seeing more of just the creativeness of God and the beauty of God and the glory of God.
Yeah.
Bring it on. That's good. Yeah. So that's where we're coming from.
Well, and that's the thing is like at the moment of judgment, we will behold, all of us will behold the goodness and the glory of God, and we'll feel it. And if we go with Him into glory, and we're with Him forever, that is going to be bliss. But if seeing what He is and who He is and where He's inviting us to, and then we're pulled away from that.
Yeah.
the anguish.
Yeah.
No wonder the gnashing of teeth. No wonder the crying and the weeping. You would kick yourself going, oh my gosh, I was this close. I should have said yes.
Right. And also, too, if you're worried about like, oh no, we don't want to jump into another cult.
Yes.
Right. And I don't jump into another cult. Okay. We have a podcast which is on how to choose a church.
Yeah.
And I'd probably even before that, I would go ahead and read Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis.
Sure.
And maybe our Apostles' Creed.
Maybe
watch those. Maybe, but that just so that you like. Okay, so what's sound? What's good theology?
Yeah.
Rather than get into something where it's controlling and sideways and making up whatever. And that's awful. No. Run away from cults. I get that. I get that.
But at the same time,
but you got to run to Jesus. Run to Jesus. Period. Because Jesus existed. Jesus still exists, and He's beautiful and amazing. Don't let anybody chase you away because you had a bad experience at some point.
Yeah.
So,
and I would say too, like, just rest assured that if there are counterfeits of something, that means there's a real thing that they're faking.
Right.
That they're trying to be like, but it's not quite right.
Yes.
There is a real thing.
Right. And I was
there.
thinking of fake Louis Vuitton bags, right? Because they're real ones, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, go ahead.
Okay.
But to your point about the way that Western culture in general deals with death, I think that's such a big thing that I've noticed in my life is just like, I've always just been taught, avoid death. Don't think about it. Don't think about it. Like, we'll just go to heaven and it'll be fine. And then, but what happens when you don't believe in heaven anymore? Just don't look at the dead body. Don't deal with it,
Right.
And I would love if there were a paradigm shift culturally where it was something we talked about more and tried to accept and like integrate into our lives.
Yeah. And it's not just about believing in heaven. Like, that isn't it. Because you need it. Well, you need an invitation. And with that as well, because she's talking obviously about death. I was a pastor. I did gobs of funerals. And the worst ones were having to do funerals for people who didn't believe.
Yeah.
Because as a pastor, I don't get to preach people into heaven.
No.
If they rejected Jesus Christ, I got nothing, to be able to say, and I don't get to turn around and go, well, he didn't want it, but ta-da! And now he has it. Now he has heaven and God. He didn't want it.
Yeah,
he rejected him. I don't want you. I don't want you. And then the pastor goes and changes it all for him. Like that. That's not a thing.
Well, I understand why there's appeal in Catholicism with purgatory, and why there's appeal in Mormonism for baptism for the dead.
Right.
Because you love people and you want people to go to heaven and be with you.
Right.
But God has made it so that we choose here.
Right.
He's chosen to...
He wants a relationship.
Yeah, he's chosen... okay, think of it this way. If you're a billionaire, it's really hard to find a date who wants to care about you for you and not your money. So in the same way, he's kind of hidden his great qualities a little bit so that if someone does want to come to him, they come to him based upon him and not all the goodies that he can give. Right. Because when you do see him, I think if you were to see him in his glory, you would worship him because that's what we're made to do. And so he's given us enough of a shielding so that we are not just automatically moths to a flame, but rather we need to choose that.
Right.
And that is the good way to do it because he's not a bully and he's not a rapist. He's not going to just take you against your will. He's going to invite you, and that's the way it's supposed to be. All right, here's another section.
Well, as a child who was constantly around death and dead bodies and people dying, don't do it to kids, but as adults, it's time to like face the music and deal with it and maybe talk about it and help people who are dying and, whatever.
Yeah, totally.
But I think kids too wrapped up in death. And again, I'm sure there's some death doula out there with her 5 kids and they love death and that's like great for them. I'm just saying I'm definitely not better for having been to 50 open casket funerals a year.
Damn.
Yeah. I think for a kid, open casket funerals are kind of weird.
They are.
That is kind of weird. And it's regretful. I don't know what, religious background she came from in all these funerals. She mentioned in the podcast and another place that there was just a lot of old people there.
Right.
That happens when there's a lot of old people there. And I can see how that could be a deterrent to somebody as a child. It would just make you feel weird. It'd make you feel kind of icky a little bit. But I don't think avoidance is the right answer.
No, it's not.
Shielding isn't the right answer. The right answer is finding the right answer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how you completely avoid death. I mean, I don't know. Maybe TV's different. Of course, there was was the Cowboys and Indians a lot on TV, like in the 70s, right?
Heck yeah.
And so they'd have all the shoot 'em ups, and they'd shoot the guy, and off the top of the saloon, and he'd fall. The stuntman who was landing on the airbag, right, and all those kind of different things. And so, I mean, we saw fake death all the time on TV, and. Yeah, and I probably saw ones that were real, but it didn't necessarily seem real because there would be black and white film from World War II, and you're shooting down the warbirds and whatever,
right?
And so they shot up the fighter plane and it falls out of the sky, and that guy died, and so we saw death, and I collected enough bugs and whatever, and if you didn't feed them, I didn't. We didn't have dogs and cats, so I didn't have that, experience with death.
Right.
Where my kids have. We had a dog that we absolutely loved, and when that dog had to be put down, that was horribly traumatic for the family, and we're not looking forward to it when, our dog's 9.5 now, and oh my gosh, my dog's not going to live forever. That kind of sucks.
That does.
So, death is. We can't avoid it. We just can't avoid it.
Especially nowadays. I mean, I would say I'm kind of shocked a little bit at the things that come through on X, formerly known as Twitter,
right,
where there's the conflict in Ukraine, literally dudes getting droned to death.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
And, Telegram, there's all the events in the Middle East and the bombings and the shootings and all that stuff, the stabbings. It's just that is a little bit too far. That's a little bit too far for your psyche. We're not made to know every horrible thing that happens on the whole planet.
Exactly. I agree with you 100% there. I think we live in a time that's very unnatural.
Yeah.
That can condense a world full of hurt and drop it into somebody's head.
A stream of hurt.
Into your feet. Because I worked on the National Youth Crisis Hotline, and so when kids would call in, right, and I think I've said it before on this, but it was unnatural because as soon as I'd hang up with whatever that was, maybe I was talking to a kid, out of suicide, I'd hang up the phone and it would ring and I gotta go again.
Yeah.
Right, and that was unnatural to have that, right, and so that was all hurt for all these kids that had access to a 1-800 number nationwide. But now with the internet, we got the hurt of the whole world that we can dial in. We can dial in to hurt everywhere and just bombard ourselves with because we live in a world that there's all sorts of evil that's out there. Yeah. But it's a created masterpiece. It's marred. It's stained, but it's still a masterpiece. Yeah. And we can still see the beauty in it. All right. Should we go ahead and?
Yep.
I don't know. Watching Coco, for example, I was like, oh my God, there's so many better ways to deal with death, and even the Jewish death rituals, and it's just longer. It's not like you have a funeral and then you bring a casserole and then that's it and no one talks to you again. There's a community around it. I don't know. I just think there are better ways than what we're used to. But
love it.
Yeah, you were the one who turned me on to Coco because I didn't know what that was a reference to.
Yeah, that was. I mean, obviously you don't have kids that age. No. I don't either. I don't know how I know it.
Yeah.
So she's talking about Coco, the Disney movie about the
Day of the Dead.
The Day of the Dead, and all the. It's not animism. It's
ancestor worship.
Ancestor worship and ancestor. being around, and we move from this plane of existence to the next plane, and it's all fine. What I consider that to be is very comforting lies.
Yeah.
Because Satan would love nothing more than to tell us that there's no worry. You're going to live, and your energy, and when you die, you're just going to convert into a different form, and you're going to be okay, and you're going to be with all your people. The scriptures are very clear. It is given to man once to die, and then the judgment.
Yeah.
There is no reincarnation. There is no second chances. There is no some kind of force and unifying with the universe and all that kind of stuff. Those are all lies from the devil, just to convince people not to seek the truth.
Right.
And that is you got to hate him for that, because
the devil, hate the devil, because of deceit.
And I see there's several channels on YouTube that I've seen of near-death experiences. Some of them are good, some of them are not. Some of them are. I really truly believe that sometimes the devil takes people and gives them a vision of a false afterlife and sends them back, or whatever, knows they're going to come back, so that they then, I've been to the other side, I don't have to think about it, because I've been there, and it's all good, it's roses and rainbows, and everything's going to be fine. And it's just a false testimony that makes people comfortable with not seeking the truth by giving them a very comfortable lie. And I understand a human's heart wanting to have comfort in this, but I really don't understand the willingness to automatically cross off the only right answer at the beginning.
Right.
Look at all of them.
Right. No, and I get it. I mean, I'm sure that there's hurt.
Yeah.
Right. And I think hurt is what makes you cross it out.
Yeah.
Okay. Because of whatever that is. Yeah. But I also know who's the one who can heal.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, I have hurt, but but the one who can heal me, the one who can save me, the one who can, it can't run away from him. That's not the smart thing to do. You can't imagine any of C.S. Lewis's stories if they all rejected Aslan.
Right.
And that things would be better if they put the White Witch or Tash or anybody else in the place of where Aslan was, that it was going to be better.
Right.
Right. And even, and C.S. Lewis is only, he's trying to describe the goodness and the beauty and the power of God, but he's also trying to do it in a form that children can understand.
Right.
So.
Man, that's a lot. I feel like we gone way long, so we're gonna end it. But man, I really hope that if this does get in front of them, if you want to send us a message, I will spend my time answering questions.
Absolutely.
If that would help you.
Absolutely. We want this to bless you.
Yeah, this is not condemnation at all. I hope you don't misread
please
it.
don't. Please don't think that. Please don't think that. And we don't have a cult. Okay? No. We're not asking you to join anything like that. No, find a good, healthy local fellowship. Yeah. Have real community with real people. Yeah. That's what we want you. We want you blessed. We want you happy.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that for everyone else who's not the Trust Us podcast, one of the things that Trust Us says at the end of their podcast is, don't trust us. In the same way, we say, if we say anything stupid, don't blame Jesus.
It was all
that was our fault.
All right. Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you.